was excited, but I felt like I was going into a test. I didn't feel a single thing of that baby coming out of me. Like, I didn't have any words at that point. Hi everyone, my name is Bailey Turnbow, and today I'm going to be sharing my labor and delivery story, which happens to be a supernatural childbirth testimony, and I am so beyond excited to do this. I've been looking forward to filming this video for so long now. So before we get started, I just want to kind of preface by saying by no means am I more spiritual, holier, or better than anyone because of my testimony. I believe the Lord gave me this experience not just because of my faith, but to also be an encouragement to others and just a testimony of the power of God when you have the faith for it. And by no means am I saying that every childbirth should be done exactly the way that I'm doing it. And no two stories are ever going to be the same. There's beauty in every single story. So I really just want to get the point across that you should never feel condemned by someone else's testimony. Instead, use it as an encouragement, because God is not a respecter of persons. What He did for me, He can do for you. So just keep that in mind as I go through the rest of the video. Alright, so before I even got pregnant, my amazing mother-in-law gave me this book, and it is called Supernatural Childbirth. I'll be sure to link it in the description for you all. It is amazing. It talks about God's promises, the faithfulness of God, the power of God. And before I read this book, I didn't even know that it was possible that you could have a pain-free childbirth without medication, because in my mind I always just reverted back to Genesis 3:16, where, I mean, depending on what translation you use, it talks about the curse over a woman in childbirth, and the curse is basically pain or sorrow. The Hebrew word means both. That a woman will be cursed with pain and sorrow during her childbirthing process. And so when I thought about that, I was like, man, well, that sucks. I guess that's just how it's gonna have to be. But I completely just forgot. It's almost like my mind shut off the part of the Bible where it says that Jesus literally broke every curse. So they talk about that in this book. They also talk about how in the story of Moses in Exodus 1, that Hebrew women birth babies so much quicker and just differently than the Egyptian women. So women who are in covenant with God have different testimonies than women who are outside of covenant with God. So that was awesome. Then one of the biggest takeaways from this book for me was knowing your faith level. So the thing is that God moves according to our faith. If we want God to move, we have to have the faith for it. But the thing is that oftentimes we are deceiving ourselves with the amount of faith that we actually have. So say if you want to get something that requires this much faith done and you only have this much faith, you'll kind of throw your hands in the air and be like, God, what the heck? Like, why didn't you move? It's because we think we have this much faith, but we only have this much faith. And what He needs is this much faith to get this much done. And so the beautiful thing about pregnancy is that it's a process. So I had 9 months to build up the faith that I needed to have this testimony and this experience. So during those 9 months, I used the Supernatural Childbirth book to kind of help me set my eyes and my focus on what it is that I had desired. I desired a fast, pain-free, easy childbirth process. I didn't want to be in labor for a long time. I didn't want to be in pain, and I wanted it to be, like I said, quick and easy. Those are pretty much the main things that I had focused on, but I had also just written out a whole bunch of birthing affirmations, scripture to meditate on, and commands for my body, so that it would stretch and be elastic, and that the umbilical cord wouldn't be wrapped around in places that it shouldn't be. And then I also had written a personal and very intimate prayer to God about just what I had wanted, and everything that I wanted was in line with God's will and word, so I knew that it could be done. And I just really meditated and honed in on building my faith and my relationship with God during the duration of my pregnancy. So while I was pregnant, I was a little nauseous in the first trimester, but really I didn't have much complication after that. Around 22 weeks, I went in for my regular doctor's office checkup, And I basically got a high blood pressure reading. It was just kind of something that they took note of. Like I said, I didn't have very many complications. As time went on, I got into the 3rd trimester and I was feeling absolutely massive. Like I was ready to have this baby. In my head, I felt like I was like just rolling around from room to room. Like growing a baby and being pregnant is an absolute blessing. It comes down to a point where you're just uncomfortable, and that's what I was hitting. So at my 37-week appointment, I had went in and I had another elevated blood pressure reading. This time it was a little bit higher, but it still wasn't anything crazy, like through the roof or anything. So they sent me to the hospital just to make sure I was cleared for preeclampsia. And at that point, I know I was hoping for a supernatural childbirth, but in that moment of time, just all of that flew out the window, and I just really wanted to have the baby. Like I was really just like, please, I don't want to be pregnant anymore. But they cleared me and I went home with no baby. Then the next week at my 38-week appointment, I had another high blood pressure reading. And so I'm not a medical professional. So this is just how I understood what they explained to me. So I may be a little off. But basically, they told me that if you have 2 high blood pressure readings after 20 weeks, you are then diagnosed with gestational hypertension, which is basically pregnancy high blood pressure. And so because of that, they wanted to induce me. So this appointment was on a Wednesday, and they wanted to schedule the induction for the Sunday. And so after leaving that appointment, I know that the previous week, I was just like, I'm ready to have this baby, like, let's go. Walking away from that appointment, I actually felt like really discouraged and really crushed, because I was just like, I wanted to have a supernatural labor and delivery. So how could I do that if it wasn't even technically natural, if I was being induced? So I was walking away with just a head full of doubts and overall just being extremely emotional. So I spent the time from Wednesday to Sunday just hoping and praying that my body would go into labor by itself and that I wouldn't have to be induced. The devil was really driving in my head that I couldn't have a supernatural pregnancy if it wasn't even natural. So sure enough, Sunday comes around. My body had not gone into labor by itself at this point. So we wake up early, we go get breakfast, we check into the hospital around 8. They hook me up to all the machines and stuff, and the nurses come in and they write down your name on the board, your pain goal, ask if you want an epidural. And at this point, like, I wasn't really sure what to tell them, because I wasn't going to tell them that I'm hoping for a supernatural pregnancy. Like, God is gonna make me have no pain, because like in their minds, I don't know where they're standing with God. They're probably gonna think like, this woman is crazy. I knew I didn't want to share that with any of the staff there before I had the baby, because I didn't want any of the contradicting voices tear down my confidence and my faith in God. That's a word for somebody. Sometimes you just don't need to say anything until the promise has been made, because people are going to try to tear you down. I mean, they'll try to tear you down regardless, but it's easier after the promise has been made. So a little bit time has gone by. My emotions are starting to get high because my body is still not going into labor by itself. And, like I said, the devil was really pushing me. Like, he was just really being like, you can't have a supernatural pregnancy because you are getting induced. It's not even natural. And so now looking back on it, that was essentially putting God in a box, because God can literally do anything regardless of the situation. So I was getting super emotional and I just started tearing up, and I turned to Otha and I was like, Otha, I'm really emotional right now. Like, I feel discouraged. And I had basically told him what I'm telling you guys, that what kept running through my mind was, I can't have a supernatural pregnancy if it's not even natural. And my husband is an amazing, honest man of God. And there are times where he knows he needs to nurture me and almost in a sense coddle me. But he also knows that there are times where I just need to hear it like how it is. And not in a mean or harsh way, but he came to me in love, but just with the truth. He said, Bailey, you've been focusing on this and desiring this and believing in God for this for 9 months now. And I've been believing it with you. I've been in agreement with you. Why would you give up at the very last second? And what's crazy too is some weeks back, I had even told him I was so excited, but I felt like I was going into a test. And so he reminded me of that. You said yourself that you felt like you were going into a test. Like, this is your test. Don't give up. You're in the very last moment of it. You can do this. And so I'm so thankful to have a man who is just so sound in truth and honesty and just overall a man of God, okay? After talking to him, I really came to my senses, and I felt like I just had so much more clarity regarding the situation. And after that, I was like, just no matter what, I'm going to trust God, and I'm going to trust God that he's going to give me what I've been having and building my faith for. So like I said, they had asked me if I wanted an epidural. I said no, and they just reassured me that it would be there if I wanted it. Around 2 o'clock is when I had gotten the Pitocin to be induced, and they had checked me then, and I was around 4 centimeters dilated. It wasn't around until 3 o'clock that I actually started feeling contractions, and I guess in my mind I thought I would feel the contractions, and then like maybe 20 minutes would go by, I would feel another one, and then the time in between contractions would just shorten and shorten and shorten. And then as the time shortened, the contractions would also get stronger. But I feel like once I started feeling the contractions, they were strong and 5 minutes apart, and it just kept going like that. So it was definitely not what I was expecting at all. And the contractions, to me, they weren't painful. It was a lot of pressure, and it did make me uncomfortable, but I would not describe the feeling as pain. Yeah, just pressure and uncomfortable. That's the best way that I can describe it. So like I said, around 3 o'clock is when I started actually feeling the contractions. Then close to 5, it was like 4:45, I started getting like extremely nauseous. So I had gone to the bathroom, and I had squatted down in front of the toilet. And I know this is kind of gross, but another big thing that I was believing in was that my water would break on its own. And they were telling me that around 6 o'clock is when they were gonna break my water so that they could push the delivery along. I kind of just brushed that off and, went on doing my thing. So yeah, like I said, I was squatted in the bathroom, and that's actually when my water had broken. And they were like, oh, I think she may have just, used the bathroom on herself. But no, that was my water. And I knew it was, because I knew that at some point my body and my faith was gonna override the medicine. So during this time, the contractions were like very, very close together. Like, I feel like as soon as one ended, like the next one was already coming. And so the pressure was very, very great. The nurse came in and she was like, hey, are you sure you don't want the epidural? And I was like, yeah, like I'm okay. But in the back of my mind, I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't considering it, because it was just so uncomfortable. And the way that I could relieve most of the pressure was in that like squatted position. So I stayed like that for probably like an hour, hour and a half. So around 6 o'clock, maybe like just before, my midwife came in and she's like, Bailey, like you need to get in bed, because I was still in front of the toilet. And I was like, okay. So I got into bed, and she checked me, and literally she was like, she's ready to start pushing. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, like, are you serious? And I kid you not, it had to be like 2 or 3 minutes. There were like 10 different people in the room. They rolled in all this different equipment. The floodlight was on. My feet were in stirrups. And this is kind of like a funny thing that I like to tell. But in those rooms, there is like no modesty for the mother, because you're in these gowns, but there's so many holes, and like it's supposed to be loose, and it's just, the modesty is completely out the door. So I had my gown and I had my socks on, and my socks were like my sense of security. So when I put my feet up in the stirrups, literally a nurse came and ripped my socks off, and I was like, I was so focused. I was kind of upset about my socks being off. It's so silly, but it's just something that I remember. The whole squad's in the room now. My feet are in the stirrups, and the midwife tells me, on your next contraction, push. So I do. I push on my next contraction, and when I first start pushing, I start making a noise. Like, this is kind of embarrassing to tell, but you know what? It's for you guys. So, I kind of start grunting. So I'm kind of like, and she looks up at me and she goes, no noise. And so me telling you that now, you're probably like, what? Why would she tell you that? But I definitely feel like it was a God thing, because the reason that I was grunting and making noise is because that's how I envisioned labor and delivery to be. Like, that's what you see on shows and TVs, is like women are making noise as they're pushing out the baby. So when she did that, it kind of like snapped that picture out of my head. And so then I was just focused on, delivering my baby. And like in the moment, I wasn't hurt or anything by it. Like, all I could think about was like, oh, okay, like let me just push the baby out. Like I wasn't focused on that. I was just more focused on giving birth. So within 3 pushes, my sweet baby girl was out. She came out so fast and so easy. And the amazing thing was I did not feel a single thing. Like, people talk about the ring of fire and how even with an epidural, you could still feel it. I didn't feel a single thing of her coming out of me. And then, like, that is so insane. My sweet baby girl Melody was born at 6:10 p.m. on April 14th, 2023. And when they laid that baby on my chest, like, every single time that I think about it and every single time that I see the picture of her laying on my chest, I always get emotional. Because in my head, I had kind of imagined like giving thanks and praise to God when she was on my chest. But at that point, I was completely speechless, because it's like, what do you say when this amazing thing has happened? And I'm not just talking about like the pain-free supernatural childbirth thing. Like, I'm talking about you give birth to a human that grew in your stomach for almost 10 months. And it's half you, half of the person that you love most in the world. Like, it truly is an indescribable feeling. I had the baby girl. She was extremely healthy, 9 pounds healthy to be exact. And this is kind of just a silly little side story, but when I was pregnant, I really desired to have a small baby because big babies run in my family. Like, all of me and my siblings were pushing 10 pounds. And I really desired a small baby. I know it's kind of silly and, whatever. But I believe that God gave me a 9-pound baby to prove that everything that had happened, the whole process of giving birth and doing so without any epidural and with no pain, with a 9-pound baby, like, that it was all him. There was no credit that I could have taken, and he gets all the glory from it. That's just kind of a word on sometimes you desire things, but God is not going to give you everything that you desire. He's going to give you what you need. Overall, it was just an amazing experience. I did end up having a 2nd-degree tear, and literally, like, while I was getting stitched up, I guess shift change had happened, because it went from like 10 people to 20 people being in the room. And I guess you would think that they would wait until I was situated to change shifts, but it kind of caught me off guard. I mean, I was still just pretty much caught up in the moment with my baby that it wasn't that big of a deal, but honestly, sometimes I look back on it now and I was like, that was kind of crazy. But yeah, we were very well taken care of in the hospital. 3 days later, we were able to take Melody home, and I mean, since then, she's just been thriving and being the biggest blessing. Like, motherhood has definitely been just so amazing to me. There have been times where it's been challenging, but overall, like, I wouldn't change this for the world. In my life, my desires have changed and I've grown and, different things, but even from a young age, I always knew that I wanted to be a mother and a wife. Walking into it and feeling like I'm fulfilling a big part of God's plan for me, it just has all been so fulfilling. And truly, I would not change any of this for the world. I would have never pictured my life to be like this. But I'm so grateful. Like, God has really picked me up out of the spiritual boonies and blessed me abundantly, because I was really going through it. And the faithfulness of God is so amazing, because he really will run after you. And He loves you so much. So much. And like I said at the beginning, God is not a respecter of persons. Everything that He's done for me, He can and He will do for you, but you have to trust Him with that. So I seriously pray that this video has been a blessing to you. I know it's pretty long, so if you've seen all of it, thank you for watching, and I really pray that the Lord has blessed you and you are walking away with some encouragement. And please, if there's any content that you'd like to see from me, let me know. Like any questions, comments, concerns, anything that you guys have, leave it in the comments. DM me on Instagram. Just let me know. I'm so excited to be making longer form videos for everyone. So if you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. I pray you have a blessed and prosperous day.